welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany and welcome to another summer weekly reading vlog. So I've kind of had not the best reading month so far in terms of not getting a lot of things finished. So I'll let you know what I'm working on this week. I am continuing a whole lot of books that I have already talked about, one of which being Scaramouche by Raphael Sabatini. This I'm reading with Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails, and I am 85-ish% of the way through. So I should definitely finish it this week. It is my primary audiobook, and I'm finding I enjoy it more on audiobook than I did physically because I was trying to read it at bedtime and my brain was like, hey. So I'm enjoying it more on audio. I will also definitely finish Cry the Beloved Country this week. I am over halfway through with this. I'm reading this with my friend Dia from Novel Idea. We're reading 4 chapters a day, so we should finish that relatively soon. This one's a bit iffy for me, and I think it's just because the writing style is very different from anything that I've ever read before, and I had certain expectations going in, not for the plot, but just because this is such a critically acclaimed book and a really well-loved modern classic, and so I had kind of some expectations going in that so far it's not really fulfilling, but again, I'm halfway-ish, so it may end up being amazing by the time I reach the end. I'm also currently reading Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. I finally hit the halfway point in this bad boy. It's taken me forever to get through this, even though I'm really enjoying it, and I've actually read a lot of it in the past week. It's taken me so long, and I guess it's just because it's 1,300 pages, but I am over the 600 page mark, definitely officially halfway through this book. Really enjoying it, but the issue that I'm having is that Oathbringer is what I really, really want to be reading, but unfortunately I have some book club meetings coming up this coming week, and I haven't started any of the books for those book clubs, and so I may need to put a little bit of a pause on Oathbringer, or at least reading it less frequently this week, so that way I can get those read. Today is Saturday, August 19th, and so I have, a week until one of my book club meetings, and then 6 days until the other one. So I really need to focus in and get those ones done, and then the other book club meeting is 3 or 4 days after the last one, so I have a week and a half for that one. So those books are, first of all, A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brannon. This is for my homeschool group book club that is in person and local, and I'm really looking forward to reading this one. I have had it on my shelf for quite a while. I've heard amazing things about it. I've heard it's basically like Jane Austen but with dragons, so how could you go wrong there? We have a little group chat where people are sharing their thoughts, and so far everyone who has started it and or finished it is loving it. So I'm really excited to read it. It's not that long, a little over 300 pages. So I think that it's not going to be too difficult of a read for me to get through, but definitely really need to prioritize this one. And then my second biggest priority is The Saturdays by Elizabeth Enright, which is my Patreon read for the month of August. This is a middle grade, so I have a whole week to read this. So I'm not concerned about this because I think I could easily read this in a day, maybe 2 days if I need to. But the fun thing for my Patreon for the month of August is that since August is Claire's birthday month, what we decided to do is that Claire could choose some books, and then we voted on which one we wanted to read. The Saturdays won the poll, and Claire is, I think, already finished it because this did have a bookmark in it and it doesn't anymore. So I think that she has finished this one, but she's going to join in our Patreon discussion for this month. So super excited about that. I think that's going to be really fun to have her there and sharing her thoughts. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know that this is actually a childhood favorite of several of the people in my Patreon, so it's going to be really fun to hear their nostalgic thoughts as we're chatting about it. The last thing that I need to read for a book club is actually, I think it's also a middle grade, so I think it's also going to be a pretty quick read, and that's The Faithful Spy by John Hendricks. This is a biography on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and it's really cool because it's got some kind of infographic style pages, some graphic novel style pages, and then some pages that have a decent amount of text. So it's kind of a mix of all those things. It's very colorful. The illustrations are super cool. I don't know a ton about Bonhoeffer's life. I do know a little bit, and I have read some of his letters and papers from prison as well. So I know why he was in prison and, what happened with all of that. But there's a lot about his life that I don't know, so I'm really interested in this. I'm reading this with Chantel for her book club. Chantel Reads All Day. And the live show for that will be on, not this coming week, but the following Tuesday. I'll put the date on the screen because this video will be up before then. So if you want to read this with us and chat with us about it, we will be live on Chantel's channel to do that. So that will be really, really fun. Really looking forward to that. So those are my reading plans for the week. Obviously, I think these are actually my biggest priority books, even though I am hoping to finish Scaramouche and Cry the Beloved Country. Even though I'd love to finish Oathbringer, I know I'm not going to finish it this week because these are big priority books, because I actually have like previous commitments and like discussions scheduled to talk about these books. So I really have to finish those ones on a timeline as opposed to the other ones. But it's going to be like kind of a busy week. My mom is coming into town next week, but not till like Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we have a kickoff for her co-op. And then also on Thursday, Claire has started up piano lessons on Thursdays, so we'll have that as well. So it'll be like a decently busy week. So what I would love to do, because today is Saturday, is I would love to spend this weekend like just reading Oathbringer. But what I probably need to do is get a jump on A Natural History of Dragons. So that way, if I get less reading done during the week while my mom is here, then it'll be fine and I won't feel like stressed out trying to finish it before it's too late. So those are just kind of my reading plans for the week, and I will update you hopefully sometime midway during the week, and then again at the close of the week as well. It is now following Friday. I am just now updating you, so I really didn't have any chance to update you. I was just kind of soaking in time with my mom, and so I didn't want to take away time from that to film or anything like that. So I'm updating you now, and I have finished a lot of books this week, which I'm really, really happy about. So the one that I finished first was Scaramouche by Raphael Sabatini. Glad that I have finally finished this one. I have not the best feelings about it. I just felt kind of detached from the story for the most part as a whole. It wasn't a bad book or anything. The writing style itself was fine. It felt older than it was in the style that it was written, so I really do feel like it kind of emulates the time that it was trying to portray. But I just never really felt very attached to any of the characters, particularly because I've mentioned so many times the main character's personality is just very flippant about a lot of things. And when he does experience any sort of emotion, he tends to hide it down and hide it behind this facade of just like not caring and putting on a front and all of that kind of stuff, which kind of really served him well being an actor in an actor's troupe, because he'd really kind of been acting a lot for a lot of his life. And so we get to the end of the book and there's some really like surprising reveals that happen, and I just kind of was like, okay. Sorry, my cat walked by and knocked the tripod almost over. I caught it, so it might be slightly shifted, so sorry about that. But I just didn't care as much, and part of that was because even in the moment where these things are being revealed and they're kind of like
moving Andre Louis in some way. He's acting like it's not, because he's like, oh, well, I don't want to show them how I really feel, and like all this kind of stuff. And so we're really, I don't know, it just felt very detached from him throughout the entirety of the story, and anything that happened at the end didn't feel like a satisfying reveal or a satisfying conclusion. It was just kind of meh for me, and that could have just been me and like the headspace I was in at the time. I'm not really sure. So not a bad book at all, just kind of fine, I guess. The other books that I finished is I did finish Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton, or maybe it's Peyton. Dia and I can't decide because there's only one T, so we're thinking maybe it's Peyton instead of Patton. I don't know. As I've mentioned before, the writing style on this is just kind of bizarre, and it feels very like disjointed and stiff at times. In a way, it might, if there's kind of like a language barrier, and maybe that's intentional on his part. But he did grow up in South Africa, but he is a white man, and so he did speak English, you know, so he also spoke these other languages as well. So it's kind of weird. I feel like there shouldn't be that feeling of this being kind of almost like this disjointed and stinted translation kind of a feel, because it was written in English, I think. So that just kind of made it feel like it was very detached at times from the characters, which made it harder to connect to them. But let me tell you, the ending of this book is so good. It's so good. There's so many things that happen, and the way things are played out, that is just really, really beautiful. And Dee and I were talking, the last chapter in particular is so beautifully written and really shows how well this author can write. He can write really, really well, but he doesn't write dialogue well. And so there are huge swaths of the book where we have dialogue, and here's an example of what the dialogue looks like, where it's just like we've got like dashes, and it's just not very descriptive, and it just like you're not getting a sense of a lot of the emotion in a lot of the words that are being said. But when Alan Paton, or Peyton, when he writes description of scenery, or he writes chunks of like just describing a situation and it's not dialogue based, it really shows like how well he can write. So I don't think that as a whole, like, this book is like poorly written. It just has a really odd style to it, and it switches back and forth between this beautiful, more like evocative prose to just something that feels kind of more choppy and stilted. And so that is kind of like a weird switch. He also switches between past tense and present tense, which is a big pet peeve of mine in books. I will still read books that have that, but it's always very jarring to me. I've not done any research on this, but I would imagine that part of the reason this book is so lauded is because of the time period that it was written in. So I'm pretty sure it was written in the 40s, and so I think that as a result of that, it was probably pretty revolutionary for its time. I don't think there are a whole lot of books coming out of South Africa about racial tensions and inequalities at this time. So I could see this being a really important book. And it is one that will be assigned to my daughter in future years with the curriculum that we use, and I think it'll be really valuable for her to read it. But it was hard to connect to it on the deep emotional level that a lot of people talk about this book, just because the writing format kind of just really rubbed me the wrong way. Last but not least, I did start and finish the entirety of A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. This is the first in the Lady Trent Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and I went into this with the expectation that this would be like Jane Austen, but with dragons. I did have the forewarning to know that the dragons in this world are not these fantastical, magical beings. They are creatures in this world. So yes, this is a fantasy setting, but it's not this, we're going to communicate with the dragons, we're going to ride and train the dragons, or the dragons have magical powers we're trying to harness. That's not how this is working. So the main character is someone who actually wants to become a naturalist and study dragons. So a lot of this book is kind of a bit more scientific feeling in terms of her wanting to study dragons, and it has pictures and sketches that she has supposedly completed of various dragons, which I just thought was a super cool addition. There's one point where they're actually able to kind of cut up a dragon and look at them. I'm trying to see if I can find that picture. So like this, there's actually a picture like what the hollowness of the bones and all of that kind of stuff. So it was just like a super cool addition. I really liked that element of it. And there was some really cool like adventurous elements to it, and because of the territory that they go to try to explore and learn about these dragons, there's like some different like political underpinnings and different things that are happening that are kind of mysterious and strange, and so there's this element of those kinds of things as well. I just feel like it was so well done. I felt like it had a lot of like heart. There was a decent amount of humor in it, and I loved this more than I was anticipating. And this is a book that I have been super excited to read for like probably like a year that I've had this on my radar. I've owned it since I think the beginning of this year, maybe, or maybe it was last year, in which case it's been more like a year and a half that this has been on my radar. And it was, I've been really excited to finally be able to read this, and like words can't express how much I adored this book. Like easy 5-star. It actually surprised me with just how much I was invested and just how much I was loving these characters. So this is taking place in a fantasy world, even though it definitely feels very British. And I also like interchanged reading this physically with listening to the audiobook, and the narrator is British, which is like, she's got the perfect British accent for this. So it was just like, it has that feel, but it's not technically England. It's like a totally different world and system and all of that kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's just so fun. But it has this feel, because of the time period it's set in, it has this feel of almost like classic literature to it in the way that things are phrased and stuff, which that's something that like really bothers me sometimes is books that are supposedly set in kind of like these medieval settings or these like Victorian type settings, and people are interchanging things like yes my lord with like oh my gosh, and I'm like, you have to pick one or the other. And I feel like this book is very consistent in its language, which is something that just made me appreciate it that much more. But highly recommend this. Super excited that it's a series and definitely want to read more of it. Well, that is what I ended up finishing this week. I had to put a pause on Oathbringer so that way I could start and finish Lady Trent, because I have a book club meeting for it in just a couple of hours after I'm filming this video. But I did make it, so I'm proud, just by the skin of my teeth. Just, you know, same day that I have a book club discussion for it. So, but I made it, so I'm really proud. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What have you been reading lately? What have you been enjoying lately? Have you read any of the books that I have been discussing in this vlog? And if so, I would love to hear your thoughts on them as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.